Welcome to another episode of the Meadow Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tracy Townsend, and I'm with
your husband, Mike.
And for this episode, we decided to focus on relationships and specifically share a little bit more about our marriage and dun dun dun. Will our marriage survive having kids and running a startup together? So in the interest of vulnerability and transparency and all of the things that I like to preach about, we're going to practice what we preach. So maybe we'll kick off the episode with, we did a little bit of just a tiny bit of like pre-production before this episode and looked up some interesting statistics when it comes to divorce. And a few of the ones that we pulled that I thought were interesting to weave in are around the risk of divorce after having your first child. And it says, research shows that 2/3 of couples report a significant decline in relationship satisfaction after having their first child. And a study from the Gottman Institute found that 67% of couples experience a drop in marital satisfaction the first 3 years after the baby is born.
Okay.
Another interesting stat is that according to the U.S. Census Bureau and longitudinal studies, divorce rates often spike between years 5 and 8 of marriage, which commonly coincides with the early child rearing phase. And I think it's really interesting that we're about to celebrate our 7th wedding anniversary. So we're right in that, we're right in that kind of hot zone.
The gateway.
Yeah, where highest risk of divorce happens.
Oh, it's not like you and I have any challenges.
No, just total marital bliss all the time. And what predicts divorce after kids? Key predictors are unprocessed resentment about division of labor, lack of emotional repair after conflict, chronic emotional withdrawal, disrupted intimacy and decreased physical affection, and feeling like roommates instead of partners. So, I think fortunately when I read about, that last bit, it's not that we don't have conflict. We have conflict daily, I feel like. But the conflict is not the problem. But it's moving through conflict resolution that is the key to a thriving long-term relationship.
Yeah, I think even before that too, it's like, what is the words we're using? We talked about that before, but like saying we got into a conflict is different than saying you got into a fight. A fight implies like the goal is to beat you, where a conflict is like, oh, you want to go to that restaurant? Well, I want to go to this restaurant. Now we're in like a conflict. So let's resolve the conflict and figure out like together, side by side, what is best for the group or us.
Yeah, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
We're on team
like shoulder
marriage.
to shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I, at least, was definitely not modeled when I was a kid, seeing my parents who were, I would say, fighting and not moving through conflict, and definitely did not have healthy conflict resolution skills, and just like very dysfunctional and unhealthy in the way that they took their anger and frustration out on each other. And I think I knew growing up that I didn't want to have a marriage like the way that my parents had their marriage. But just having the desire alone is not enough to actually, it's like a different thing entirely to put into practice the things that actually lead to a healthy marriage.
Yeah, so true. We have such strong like subconscious operating systems that we sit here now on this podcast. I'm like, yeah, I make all my own choices, right? Like I'm in control, this guy, but obviously that's not the case. We get captured in like this rapture of depression or anger or, these vices that become of us. And it's like, you see it with kids as well, because they're not ashamed of it. So they just are those expressions when they come out, and it is a complete decoupling from their normal. I mean, we're like all bipolar as children.
And a little bit as adults.
Yeah. Is that even a bad thing? With so much to get to, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of at least my growth and development has been, as I've shared before, around developing emotional intelligence and just emotional maturation that it's like honoring the fact that we are emotional creatures. There's nothing less evolved. In fact, I believe it's part of our highly evolved like human consciousness is intimately weaved with the fact that we are emotional creatures. And the reasons why we are so emotional is because we're social creatures. We live in large tribes and communities and networks, and no human lives in isolation. And so therefore we developed these emotions to signal to each other and to ourselves, like how to get along socially within the group, within the tribe. And for sure, I think moving through the way that modern relationships are constructed now, especially like with a nuclear family and just all of the particular constraints of like living in the modern world, it's its own. It presents its own challenges and opportunities. And I actually don't think it's any better or worse than before. I think sometimes there can be this this fantasy illusion or like the naturalistic fallacy that, 1,000 years ago when we were all hunter-gatherers, or not even 1,000 years ago. I mean, civilization has been massive civilization has been a project probably for the past like 5,000 years, 10,000 years. And so, we can fall into this. I find it very disempowering to think like, if only I were a hunter-gatherer thousands of years ago, then I would have like fantastic mental health. I wouldn't even think like mental health wasn't even a thing. It's just that our consciousness has changed so drastically from that time, given the impact that technology has on us and just the modern world and all of that, that we like, that is gone. Like that is not the reality we were living in. So I'm much more interested in how do we thrive and flourish with the particular constraints that we are given, which I much prefer compared to starvation and famine. So yeah, I guess like it might be nice to go into, when, like a more vulnerable question would be, was there ever a time when you felt like our relationship was truly like threatened or, in an existential crisis?
Like this week?
Come on, we haven't had one this week, fortunately.
I've said this to you. I feel like a really unusually strong bond to you that I feel like we're meant to do something really, really, I don't know if it's special is the right word, but like it feels like I was meant to do this. I was meant to be with you, feeling I have deep down. And so there's no like question. It's not like I'm like an animal in the sense that like other feminine bodies like catch my eye, but like hooking up with other women. No, they don't. And I'm like, man, I don't know if we could. The questions I'll have is like, I don't know if we can work together. That'll be one that'll go through my head, and that's always been the biggest thing is like, can we be productive together? Because I like to work, and I can only work in a way that we can like build things and do things, and like if we can't do that, then we should go and. But even then, I'm like, well, no, I feel like we really were meant to do this too. It wasn't just like be married or have kids, or it was like the whole package. So there's like a cognitive dissonance between, like two parts of my brain that like conflict sometimes. But definitely one side always remains very grounded to, no, this is like a deeply divine thing that my soul incarnated here to do with you, involving this plant medicine work and I think that weaves into the bigger, like we're surfing a huge wave of mental injuries, illnesses, and the pharmaceutical industry's role, which is like massive in the world, and so like the rise of psychedelics and like AI, all at and the internet, all at the same time. It's like there's like these monster effects that are occurring in society, and we're like, oh, you were like the first doctor to get licensed in the Western world for psilocybin. Like, that statement alone is so significant. And we run a service center, a beautiful, awesome building here to do like legal work. And so, I mean, I'm like a month or two into this, and I feel like this is something that we could do for who knows how long. But yeah, to your point,
I think for me to answer that question, I think of more in the past as opposed to like now. Like we've been through so many tough times, I think, in our relationship that moving forward, it's almost like once you've been through the trials and tribulations and you realize, okay, this is my ride or die person that like hasn't given up on me and I haven't given up on them. Like each time, you grow closer after the conflict as opposed to, what the Gottmans talk about, which is like emotionally withdrawing after conflict.
Yeah, I think resentment is the key variable in that equation. Like,
So I think
builds, it's hard.
Yeah, like we've been through like, I mean, the things that come to mind for me are after the birth of each of our child. Like it was very challenging times in our relationship, and particularly after our second child. I just remember one time, just like in that postpartum roller coaster, I think Luna was maybe 4 or 5 months old, and I hit a rock bottom mentally. Like just the sleep deprivation and the hormones and all of that, like gave me like an intense flight response where I wanted to I was fantasizing about just like running away. I never was going to act on it, but it was very strong, the impulse, and I mean, I give credit to you too for staying level-headed through all of it, and giving me what I needed to just sleep and all of those things that mothers get totally lost in the postpartum journey. And also it was a reactivation for me of really old wounds, really old wounds.
I think that's why it was so intense.
Yeah, that's why it was so intense. I was just revisited at that time also intensely with grief with my dad and all of it piled up together. And it was really, really hard. I feel like even as I was moving through it though, that I was actually so grateful to be feeling the intensity of all of that. It felt like a tsunami wave. And it just gave me an even deeper, more profound compassion for anybody who's going through any of life's horrible tragedies that visit all of us at some point in life. To just really, really hit that rock bottom and feel almost that sense of relief of it doesn't go deeper than this. Yeah. The depth of my grief, the depth of my sadness, the depth of all of it, just finally and I also give you credit too for holding space for me in that, because it's just to witness that and not take it on as your responsibility or anything like that. It was really beautiful, because I move through so much judgment of myself when I'm processing all of those emotions of just how ugly it looks or something, just those judgy thoughts. When it's really just just a cathartic release of all of the emotions, just really full body sobbing. That's what it looks like. And we've all been so conditioned to judge that or be scared of it or uncomfortable with it. And that's what I share with so many people about the container that we create here is for people to really move through the depths of whatever it is. They're not even conscious what they need to visit and move through. But just to trust that there's nothing that phases us in this space. You can be wailing in what other people would call psychotic is no, that's part of the healing process. You're moving intense trauma a lot of times. A lot of times it's intergenerational trauma, it's ancestral trauma, and it's just moving through your body, and it's not even of your own volition. You're just releasing it, and Western medicine doesn't have any conception or they just it all falls under the umbrella of psychosis and pathologized. And if you go to indigenous communities and or how indigenous medicine is practiced, I know that this is all part of the healing process. This is literally how we're wired, is to move energy this way. And it's amazing what happens when you do allow yourself to go there, because it no longer has the charge that it once did.
Yeah, it's been discharged.
Yeah, it's literally been discharged out of you, and you can make sense of it. And you can now that it's out of the limbic part of your nervous system, it's like, oh wow, now I can reprocess those memories and have and you can then be in the more like prefrontal part of your brain and move forward with a little bit more and a little bit more balance, but you can't ignore the emotional processing part. There's no getting past that.
So what's the difference between a healthy discharge of those emotions versus like expressing them on somebody else, and then being like, what did I do in this case to hold space versus like, you know, like your parents that you gave the example, they both experienced that discharge of energy, but they weren't able to integrate from it, or because they were in conflict with each other, they didn't feel safe after it? Like, what's the key ingredient?
I mean, I think part of it is, I mean, not that when that happened, for me, after our daughter was born, it wasn't like I set up a ceremony and had intention and all. Like, ideally, you have all, and I was sober. I wasn't like in taking some psychedelic medicine. I do think that the periodic ritualistic ceremonial use of especially an earth-based psychedelic medicine does help you intentionally go there, and it's in a container. It's contained. It's not, that's to me like almost it's like a more mature expression of it, rather than waiting until you get triggered by something minor, by your partner or your intimate, your family member, or whomever, and then just reactively discharging the energy that way. Mm-hmm. That's like, it's just more unconscious. Mm-hmm. Not to say that I was conscious going into that time when you were supporting me. I don't know. How would you answer that question?
I think that because I didn't have I wasn't coming in with a set of triggers that were going to be set off by your energy. Like it was not. I was able to act consciously. Like I was able to be there as if I'm here. I didn't lose myself. Whereas if I had, grown up in a circumstance where I had abusive parents or some combination of awful things that made it such that I would perceive your outbursts as direct attacks on me, and then I need to defend myself and attack you back, or like banish from the scene, then you feel like further ignited and you don't feel the support and safety. You don't feel that in your heart, that safety that's there, that then like brings you back up to the surface. Like if you're at rock bottom, like you got to go up, you can stay there and you can, break through it and find new levels of depth and hell. So I think there's like a kind of similar to here in this space, when you know you're in a safe space and the person you're with is able to hold that space and not be emotionally reactive to your outbursts. It's like a child. When they start screaming or they hit you, if you react and hit them or grab them and hurt them and you're angry, visibly angry, they're going to get more angry. But if you're not, it's like, okay, you're hitting me now. Like we're going to calm down, and like eventually it just diffuses. And it doesn't get to a point where it's incapable of being integrated later. They still remember.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up is like, that's like the function of a guide or a facilitator, which is to be this form of secure attachment.
Yeah.
And like so, and you didn't take it personally. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard when you're in intimate relationship with somebody where you can, like you said, trigger their own wounding, mm-hmm. and for that person to take whatever you're releasing personally and get defensive, and this even happens in therapeutic relationships also with like a therapist. Like there's this idea of like transference and countertransference, and if you're with a therapist who isn't fully aware of their own triggers and wounding, like you can fall into unhealthy dynamics with a therapist as well. I do think that is crucial. To have that loving, non-judging, compassionate presence there. And yes, like you just said, same thing for our children. We are the best forms of ourselves as parents when we don't take their emotional outbursts personally. It's never about like, the vast majority of the time, it'll be interesting to dive into this a little bit more, but I think the vast majority of the time they're not challenging your authority. And so therefore to respond in an authoritarian way is not necessarily going to get you where you want with your kid. Most of the time, especially with really young kids, when they have an emotional outburst or activation or meltdown, tantrum, whatever you want to call it, it's because they're tired or, they're just not able to regulate themselves. Either they're tired or they've been masking all day and now they're finally comfortable seeing you. So they just let their guard down and just let things out. And so what would I want? What would you want in those circumstances is somebody to just like compassionately understand that, it makes sense that you are upset right now. Like I would be too.
No difference as an adult too. Those are the same reasons adults get upset.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like there's that. Yeah. I mean, it's just basic like validating, right? But that guy Jimmy on relationships who shares on Instagram. Yeah. He had a really funny bit that I came across recently where he has like his little team of coaches like helping him to move through a challenging situation with his wife. And it's like the scene is basically he can't say anything right. Like she twists everything that he says, even when he's like validate, and she's like she doesn't want to be validated. Yeah. You basically can't win. Yeah. And so in that case, when I saw that, I was like, in that case, it is up to the woman. Like it's not up to the man to validate you. And that's where we could get into work too about like. So much of the work I do with people and with our clients, and then especially I would say, women, is learning how to validate your own emotions. You don't need your partner or anybody else to validate your emotion. You become self-sourced and you're like, this is my emotion. You just accept it, and it's true, and it's what it is, and you don't need to ask for advice or put any of that validation externally. You become internally validated because you're so connected with your truth that it doesn't matter, and it's just, and the emotions are simply messengers or teachers to show us how to move back into alignment again. But that's its own journey, its own work.
Is the shadow side to that internally validating idea that one could be kind of like gaslighting?
You mean like people? A narcissist?
Right, where you just believe what you believe is the truth and other people are just wrong. And so you're validating your own opinions and emotions.
Well, I think the key there is not invalidating other people's emotions in the process of validating your own. That's true. It's recognizing and I think this has been a key part of you say that all problems are communication problems in a marriage. Like communication has been absolutely the cornerstone of our process. And in particular, I would call it conscious communication and specifically the practice of active listening. So this is something that I also give our clients consistently as a resource when we're moving through integration. I'll oftentimes open up an integration session and we have, monthly integration groups about, people bring, what they're working with, whatever challenges are to work with. It's almost always a relationship problem.
Yeah, isn't this the book, The Courage to be Disliked by Adler? His whole idea?
Yeah, I mean, there's many ideas in that book that tie to this, but the active listening is specifically I learned from Matt Moshari, who's the executive coach, and then and specifically through our friend. Shout out to Quentin, who helped me and actually did when he was visiting and staying with us a short. I think it ended up being like a 45-minute coaching session. And he shared with me this resource about this idea called active listening. And so the way that, and I was saying, I give this to our clients all the time because the vast majority of problems are relationship problems, which boil down to communication problems. And so it's just learning how to communicate. And active listening is when you do find yourself in conflict with the other person, Matt Moshari actually teaches this with respect to communicating within a company, but like I think this totally applies to your marriage or any intimate relationship where you can come into conflict. But what happens is like there's a conflict, which means there's a disconnect between the story that I have and that I'm running on and the story that you have and that you're running like your reality off of. And so there's a disconnect there. And part of moving through the conflict is the miscommunication is to listen to each other first. And part of active listening is, I think the hardest part in this is choosing who goes first. And so, we would do this when my mom lived with us. Every Saturday, we would have the airing of grievances, as I called it. And fortunately, we had you to mediate this. So we had a much better chance of it with someone like my mom, but because we had you mediating. But like, say my mom and I got into conflict, so then I would choose to listen to her first, active listening, and I would completely set aside my version of events, the story that's going on in my head, my narrative, and simply listen. It's simple, but it's so hard, but listen to her story and understand her story better than she understands it herself. You're listening to understand, not listening to defend or rebut. That's how most people enter into a conversation about moving through conflict, right? Like you start sharing and they're like, but no, it was this instead. And it's like, no, it wasn't that. And you try to correct the other person and insert your version of events. And so it's first just acknowledging that like each person has their experience of reality. And we all come to our formulation of our experience of reality. First of all, it's a controlled hallucination, our experience of reality, and it's all filtered through our past lived experiences and the like predictive processing code that we have for understanding reality. And so every person's going to have we have a shared reality, but we also have a slightly different interpretation of reality when we move through. So it's understandable why we will have misunderstandings and alignment there. And so, just listening to understand instead of to defend and to repeat. This is a really important part, to repeat back to the person their story and their version of events and how they feel and how their understanding of it better in words that they didn't even use, and better than they could even describe. And when you're able to do that, it completely discharges the other person. They feel heard. It's like listening to help so that people feel heard. And once when the other person feels heard, only then are they going to be able to fully listen to now your version of events and to understand where you're coming from. And I find that the more emotionally mature person, it's better for them to go first in the dynamic. So in the dynamic between
listen first.
To listen first, yeah. So, for example, in the dynamic between you and me, I would say you are just less emotionally charged in general than I am, and more mature, and so oftentimes you're the one doing the listening first. I'm the one that usually has the problem in our marriage, right? Like something happened, and I needed to share my version of events, and you get to listen, not to defend. But to understand, and not only understand, but understand it better than I do, and say that back to me in words that I didn't even use.
Well, I think so what you're saying is, yeah, I think that this was initially popularized by Carl Rogers, the psychologist, and the idea of active listening takes and the other two things I'd add is accentuating the other person's words to make them really poignant. So instead of saying, yeah, you're upset, it'd be like, and you were terribly, terribly upset. Like, just,
you're fucking pissed.
Sure.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, good example. The other thing
take it 10x. That's like what they're saying, it's actually 10x.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing is to have the other person respond with like, yes, that's good enough, or no, you're missing something.
Yeah.
So being willing to iterate through that. It's not like I talk, you tell me, and then we switch. It's like, no, I have to accept first what you're saying that I understand. Like I have to say, I understand. I believe that you understand me. And then I think then that softens it up for that person to be like, okay, got my piece out. Now I can listen.
Yeah, usually it's like, yes.
Yeah.
Like, that you've got the story right and that you're getting there when the other person's like, yes, exactly. Like, yes.
Yeah, it is. If you really think about it, what you really want is for them to understand you. So the compromise you're willing to make is just waiting. Are you willing to wait?
To be to have your story under. Yeah, well, I think the hardest part of this is that it just because you're embodying their story and understanding it from their perspective perfectly does not mean that you're accepting it as your story or your version of events or what happened. I think there's also this illusion that like there's some objective truth out there and like I have the objective truth and you don't, like, and it's about me convincing you of, my version. And that's not actually what conscious communication is about. Like you're consciously aware that like there are two different narratives here of what is going on. And it's just simply about understanding each other. And so by understanding the other person and helping them feel heard, trusting that you will get to share and that they will actually be able to hear you.
Yeah, and I think similar to like boats passing in the night, sometimes our stories may not conflict at all. Like I may have viewed, you took the last of the ice cream, and that was like really important to me because I looked forward to that all day long, and like I did do that, and I'm sorry, but I didn't know that. Like it could be a story where I hear you, you hear me. Okay, great, now we understand each other. Sometimes it's like I see that you feel like I didn't treat you well. It's like, well, that's not right, because it's not just about how you feel. It's like what actually happened. And sometimes there is a conflict in the direct interpretation of the set of events.
Yeah, that's the interpretation is the story. Like you might,
because intention.
I think a good example would be like what would be like a real life example recently? I have a good example. Yeah. You asking to go to jiu-jitsu in the evening when Luna was like 6 months old, right? Like I can interpret that leads to a conflict because I interpret that as you don't care about me taking care of me. I'm like in survival mode. I'm not sleeping in the night. I'm still nursing her through the night. I'm exhausted. The end of the day is my worst time of day. That's like when I need your support the most. Like, why would he be asking me to go to jiu-jitsu when he knows that I am just in survival mode right now? Like, he must not care about me. He only cares about himself.
Exactly right. And that's where I think the example with the ice cream, or I was going to say, your mom and you with like, where utensils go and which
it's never about the thing.
It always is like, how deep does it go?
Yeah, it's always about like the story that you layer on top of it.
And the other stories that it's connected to.
I also think it's really tight. Well, okay, just to close the loop on active communication and how to move through it. So once one person has shared their version of events and they feel, it's been reflected back by the other person, they feel heard. Well, then you have the other person, you switch. Another person has to share. And I think this is the one part too that maybe, we shouldn't gloss over if you're the more emotionally mature person where you're like, you know what, my story doesn't really matter. We don't need to share about it. No, you do need to share about it because that, again, is like a form of emotional repression when you don't share about it and you think you're not building resentment, but you are. So you need to be heard. And the other person also, once they've been heard, like needs to share that with the other person. And then when you can both see where the misinterpretations happen, or it's just in different interpretations of the thing. And you can understand, oh, I can see why you would have that interpretation. Oh, I see why you have that interpretation. And then you can move forward with the actual solution that you're meant to have. So in the case of you doing jiu-jitsu in the evenings, it's like, okay, maybe you do that for a while, but then you're not going to do it for a period of time until this, next milestone or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's important for the other person to express it too. Because the thought pattern is going to be in that person's head. Like in this example, it's like, is it worth bringing this up? Is this person able to handle what I'm about to say as my authentic truth? Or will that cascade into like a worse set of circumstances. You know, is this person going to get like upset at me even voicing my opinion? Because many people just don't feel safe saying what they believe to be true, which is why you just wouldn't say it and you'd hold it in and repress it. And then
I think creating like, this is why, again, going back to the example of my mom, we made a consistent time where we could both show up with full nervous system capacity to move through that. So it's like, okay, we're not going to randomly move, through active listening, conflict resolution on Thursday night with the chaos of the week, everything. We're like, no, we're going to do this on Saturday morning. We set a time, and it was like our therapy session, right? We just do this active listening session to clear the air, misunderstandings, what have you, and to come up with new solutions where we're bumping up against something not working right.
Yeah. And so I think what maybe you feel free to transition us if you want. But one thing I think that's interesting related to that is you come out of it with a set of like we each understand each other. We agree that the other person understands us. We verbally consented to that. And then there's like a set of things that we usually write down, like Tracy will not put the butter knives in this cabinet, whatever, right? They're usually kind of like things that bother us, and they're not that big of a deal with someone else. So great, we extract those, write them down, send them out, live by them. They're like logistical concerns. And I think therapy on whole is Western medicine's, like allopathic medicine's response to this this whole game of like psychology. They basically output pharmaceutical drugs and therapy, right? That those are maybe on the fringes. There's like massage or acupuncture, maybe those would be like adjacent related somehow, go like you get approved from insurance to get acupuncture if you're like really upset or something. but on whole,
you mean in terms of relationship struggles?
Your point earlier was like psychedelics, in particular earth medicines, are really needed because we provide this safety, this space, and this medicine to use it and express.
Well, they're needed because people have a problem with their emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And I think okay, I'm conflicting with this person. Therapy can be really useful for modulating that and helping like calm the temperature down, but it doesn't like heal it. It doesn't like get to the root of it. Like that might be the role of deep contemplation. It might be
what would be the root of it in this circumstance?
It would be like, okay, why does this bother you? Well, what you did to me when I was 5 years old, it really hurt me. And
you mean like getting to the core wounds that lead to the triggers?
Yeah, the somatic responses that we have, the emotional connections to these like seemingly trivial things that mean so much.
I think therapy can, for a certain type of person, can get you pretty much there. Like there are people who talk about the Hoffman process. I mean, you can spend $5,000, go do a week of trauma therapy and like make huge progress. Yeah. So, but you have to be open to that and self-aware and like a whole host of other, I think, pieces in place that help you to be receptive to that. For a lot of people, they will make perfect sense of the stories cognitively, intellectually at that level. Like, so, okay, it makes sense in my prefrontal cortex, but it doesn't make sense in my peripheral nervous system. Yeah. Like hasn't been fully integrated on the somatic level, as you say, in which case I also meet, plenty of people who've made a lot of progress in therapy and then they get stuck again. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, why am I still getting triggered? Yeah. Why am I still having these reactive outbursts? Why am I still? And it's where, doing really deep psyche level work to reset your entire default mode network and nervous system can be the most powerful modality.
So from here, do you want to talk about these four?
The four horsemen of divorce I can, yeah. The four horsemen of divorce, according to the Gottmans, who are, some of the most famous researchers on marriage. So these are they studied couples, and when they noticed one of these, these four things happening, they could, I think John Gottman at one point could predict with something like 95% accuracy after talking to a couple, like having one session with them, whether or not they were going to go on to become divorced. And so the first one is criticism. attacking your partner's character instead of addressing a specific behavior. So an example would be, you never help around the house. You're so selfish. And the reason why it's damaging is because it implies that there's something wrong with them, and it's not just about the action. The second of the four horsemen is contempt. Mocking, sarcasm, name-calling, or eye-rolling, conveying superiority or disgust. So an example would be, oh, you're tired? Must be nice to sit on your ass all day. And why this is a problem is because Gottman found that contempt actually is the number one predictor of divorce because it erodes respect and creates emotional injury.
Wait, can we double click on that for a second? So contempt is it just hating someone? Like what's the...
When you feel superior or to the other person, or you have disgust towards the other person.
Is that usually in like a characteristic way? Or it wouldn't be a physical way. It's not like I'm...
Mocking, sarcasm, name calling, or eye rolling would be examples. You're just like yeah, like, oh, like that you just have no room for the other person's, like, you just have zero empathy.
It's like dehumanizing them.
Totally, yeah. Defensiveness, so self-protection through blame shifting or victimhood. I think this one's huge. I wouldn't have yelled at you if you hadn't been nagging me would be an example. And the reason why it's damaging is because it blocks repair and escalates conflict instead of de-escalating. I think that's a huge part of our relationship too, is like me just taking ownership over my experience and my emotions and all of it. And you, the same for you, like you taking ownership over your actions and your experiences and your emotions. Like not blaming the other person, like, oh, you made me do whatever, X, Y, Z. And then the fourth one is stonewalling. So shutting down, withdrawing, or going silent instead of engaging. I mean, to be very sweeping gender, stereotyping here, I do think men, like this happens a lot with men, to just shut down, withdraw, or go silent. It's like an avoidant kind of defense mechanism. And so an example would be walking out the room or giving the cold shoulder. And the reason why it's damaging is because it signals emotional disconnection, which can trigger abandonment or anxiety in the other person.
Yeah. I think that, like, why is that true? Why do men tend to do that? It seems to me that there's a like cultural reinforcement of expressing the emotions, like crying or expressing that is a kind of weakness, and it is a kind of exposure to vulnerability. Like to say how you really feel means you can hurt me. And so men don't want to be hurt. They want to be strong. They want to be able to protect themselves and their family. Historically, for sure, in context, but now maybe it's more like psychologically or financially as opposed to physically, but there's like the physical dimension. And then I think it's like, okay, I'm going to optimize for keeping it together. So like being in conflict, expressing my vulnerability, that might really change things. That might like break me apart, change our relationship. It'd be better to just like wipe it under the rug kind of thing. And it's like a coping mechanism that like kind of works. It's kind of effective for some period of time sometimes, but it's the same thing as like anger. It's like effective and sometimes, but it just if the dial gets too high or it becomes too frequent, it really becomes so counterproductive.
Yeah, right? I mean, I think it's better than potentially losing your shit on your,
like on
your
really
wife.
Angry. Yeah.
Sorry, what?
Men will get very angry too.
Yeah, I think for men who don't trust themselves with their anger, to know how to feel anger without acting on it, then the safer thing to do would be to.
Because you'd rather have an avoidant man as opposed to an abusive man. Right? Like,
I mean, that's like one of those would you rather questions.
Yeah,
I think they're both pretty terrible, and they both lead to an erosion of the relationship. But yeah, like I mean, I do think though that the core issue there though, again, is an issue of emotional intelligence, of being able to feel your emotions without necessarily acting on your emotions. That is, that's the real challenge, I think, that we as a species are learning how to move through. And all the time I'm teaching our son Leo, how to feel frustration and anger and disappointment without acting in a destructive way, without wanting to throw things or hurt another person physically and that sort of thing. And so, how many of us reach into adulthood and we still haven't figured that out? How do you feel all of these so-called negatively valenced emotions, and mind them for the wisdom that they have, and then and not act on it in a destructive way.
Truth. All right. Well, we're pushing time here.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
Awesome. Peace.